or that letter might have been after the robbery.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. Well, no, actually, good point. Very good point. There was a letter.
Oh, from
Peter Davidson. Exactly. Now watch what happens. Watch this. Because my background is Roman Catholic and Satmar, I'm obviously a sympathizer with the whole Indian Sant tradition. I mean, my heroes, Ramana Maharshi, I'll be straight out. Faqir Chand, Maharaj Chand's, Pratap Singh Tanam, perhaps some other gentleman. But since I'm a supporter, in fact, I love the Sant tradition. I think it's a beautiful tradition. What John-Roger and I discussed this. What John-Roger did is he wrote letters to India using this Peter Davidson as a cover, so that these Indian spiritual leaders would then write to me to prevent me from writing about John-Roger. It was like his way of getting at me. That is, instead of writing to Jackie, because you wouldn't have any influence there, except for saying David the widower, he thought, well, geez, what I'll do is I'll write to India, and I'll write to David Lane's, the saints that he admires, so that when those saints get these letters, they'll write to David, so David will stop.
Was he requesting anything?
Oh, absolutely. He was requesting those particular saint, one particular saint, to write to me, to prevent me from writing anything on John-Roger. Interestingly enough, the saint just sent me the letter and said, I don't think Peter Davidson's a real person, and I don't think he deserves a reply.
Really?
It was obvious Peter Davidson was fraud.
Were somewhere in these letters, there's so many of them.
Yeah, it's a good point. Let's mention just a few before we get into Peter Davidson.
Right.
There's the scumbags letter. There's a letter where their mouths, Wendell's and Wes's and Sue's and anybody else's will be washed out. In fact, some people may be killed if they continue to talk to you. Explicit death threats. And if you look at any of my articles, particularly the criminal activities of John-Roger Hinkins, it's all laid out there. And why would somebody send out smear letters making death threats against people before an article has ever been published? Send it out of a P.O. box. Who signed for the P.O. box? John-Roger.
And this is before the J.R. controversy.
This is before the J.R. controversy. All of this stuff, all these smear letters, for one reason. They wanted to prevent that research coming out because we had touched the tip of an iceberg.
The smear letters were they mentioned in the J.R. controversy?
Yes, they were mentioned, not in the J.R. controversy, you're right. They were not mentioned in the J.R. controversy.
Even though letters came out before the
beforehand. Why? Because I just wanted to concentrate at the issue at hand. That is, the allegations that had been made. I realized in the follow-up study, which I did, the criminal activities, I would mention those smear letters, which came out.
Right. So, after the article came out, this was part of your series of understanding cult and spiritual.
Brainwash, bottom line is people want to understand where did this stuff come from, who's publishing this stuff. What happened was a friend of mine, Brainwash, a hell of a nice guy, one of the first guys to graduate from JFK, University of North. He was the one who published The Making of the Spiritual Movement. He's the one who started Delmar Press, but he wanted to be behind the scenes. So in 1983, we gave a talk at UCSD on understanding cults and spiritual movements. Kind of a critical assessment. I don't care if it's Radhasoami, I don't care if it's Satmar, I don't care if it's Roman Catholicism. Just some kind of critical questioning of various traditions. So he said, why don't we start a journal? A journal called Understanding Cults and Spiritual Movements. Well, we decided to do it, and the first issue was on John-Roger. So that's how it was. So we did 7 issues of that.
And how was that circulated?
Well, it was circulated actually informally. We didn't make any gross advertisements. We weren't pushing it on people. We just had a mailing list of a certain kind of core people. Melton at UC Santa Barbara, Jurgensmeyer at Berkeley, a number of academics, a number of scholars, where we wanted to get this information out. And I've actually never pushed that information on anybody. It was conscious.
And what kind of reactions were you getting from that article?
You mean the first one?
Yes.
Well, the first one was pretty good. A number of people left MSIA. A number of people were shocked. A number of people didn't like it. And that's to be expected. But interestingly, I would not have predicted that J.R. was such a charlatan as he was. I mean, that was just a little bit, like I said before, a tip of an iceberg about what J.R. was about.
So then after the article, you felt perhaps your job was done, and you brought these allegations to the public's attention, at least to cult researchers and people that have an interest in...
Right. I find John-Roger intrinsically boring. I'll be real honest. Intrinsically boring. The subject of him is intrinsic. He doesn't write anything original. He's not like a Duff Friedjohn, otherwise known as Dudley now, who is a brilliant thinker. A brilliant writer, even though he may be a fraud, he's got 9 wives in Fiji or whatever he's doing. The guy's a great writer, and he's intrinsically interesting to read. Even Eckankar, even Twitchell's a little more creative. I find John-Roger boring, and therefore I had no juice to really write about the guy. So when I did the J.R. conference, it was just kind of like done. But these smear letters kept coming out in his phony P.O. box, and then, like I mentioned before, I get robbed, and that seals the deal.
Speaking of robbery, can you just start from the beginning on that?
Okay, it's October 5th. It's a Friday. It's the day before Steve Garvey hits the great home run against the Chicago Cubs, if anybody wants to timeline this thing. I'm at UCSD. And what happens is, I come home, walk, it's about 12:30, try to get into the apartment. I can't get in. And I'm going, wait a second, it's bolted. It can't be bolted unless somebody's inside. Then I'm thinking, Jackie's home, but no, Jackie's at work. That couldn't happen. So I looked in the bedroom window and I went, oh my God, the place had been ransacked. Bed overturned, dresser drawers are pulled out, and I climbed through the window. And you got to remember, I had no idea that this was a cult-related robbery. I just thought somebody's working this place over, somebody wants to take the stereo or the TV. So I look all around, the place is just ransacked. I'm still trying to figure out what they took, because the TV's there, money's there, jewelry's there, and then all of a sudden what happens is, I see the phone line has been disconnected, cut. Then I see a note, I'll hang this up, I hope we can get this on video, a note which was written on a box. This note says, no more. This was written on a box containing John-Roger's articles, the J.R. controversy. Then I noticed that all my research had been ripped off. I mean, briefcases, documents, Jackie's diaries were taken, a camera was taken, some videotapes were taken, precious letters were taken, all related to Eckankar, John-Roger, or my research on Sai Baba. So I realized right then that it was cult-related, and I knew it was John-Roger related. In fact, preliminary handwriting analysis indicates the note that was left at the scene of the robbery is John-Roger's handwriting.
Then what did you do?
I watched Steve Garvey at a baseball game the next night. Now, what happened was I called the Channel 8 News, and they came out. It was the lead story on Saturday. I then contacted Michael Fader, who was John-Roger's right-hand man, to find out if JR was behind it.
You didn't call the police, or?
I did call the police. The sheriffs came out. They did a whole investigation. They took fingerprints. They took testimonies. They took statements. The interesting point I should mention is that whoever did the robbery, I'm convinced is John-Roger, and a friend of his, did it between 9 o'clock in the morning and 12 o'clock in the morning. And as you know, Delmar's a fairly popular place. I happen to live on a fairly popular street. I'm amazed whoever robbed my house could do it in broad daylight. Somebody that had been obviously casing the joint.
Didn't you once indicate you were also interviewed by the media about this?
Yeah. The Channel 8 News came out the next day. I think it was named McAllister, if I don't forget.
How did the media become aware of this robbery?
What had happened was, I think either Jackie or myself called Channel 8 News to mention that this had happened. Because we felt it was very strange that somebody took research documents. Well, they were highly interested since I teach at UCSD, and they came out immediately.
So then you called Michael Fader.
Right, I called Michael Fader. The bottom line is, you get your house robbed, you get your research documents stolen, and there's only two suspects, Eckankar or MSIA. I knew it was not Eckankar, and we'll tell you that in a second, why it's not Eckankar. But my gut level was this MSIA. So I called Michael Fader and I said, is JR at home? And he said, no, I can't give you that information now. And right then I got a little suspicious. So I talked to Michael Fader. I said, look, I've just been robbed. If it's John-Roger, I'd like my materials back. And blah, blah, blah. I was obviously really mad and angry. I think I eventually hung up on him. I was mad, upset.
Sure.